I've tried to do is combine what's here. The upper green line, that represents our median cost for replanting. So that sets up there just a little above 100 acres, but it's, or excuse me, $100 per acre. It's highly variable, however, but so it can vary. I've seen data that some of their own records indicate that it can vary as much as up to $200 or even more in some cases. It's a very, especially some difficult sites, we pay for it. So that's set up there as a reference for the cost of replanting, just replanting. And then the fire icons that I've placed in there, using the axis on the left-hand side with acres, those are the number of acres that are burned into what we've been referring to as a deforested condition. You may remember in the first presentation, the first of the series, I described the deforested condition as a case where high fire severity has killed most of the trees. So it's along a gradient, however, but most of the, up to something like 50, 60, 70% mortality in some of these cases really makes the area look devoid of living trees. Anyway, so those numbers there, just a little shy of 70,000 acres for 2008, those represent the pine, the mixed conifer, and some true fir acreages that were burned with high severity. And you can see that play along from 2008 all the way to 2013. The next part of this graph, though, is the blue bars. And the blue bars represent the acres that were planted. So you can see in 2010, the highest bar, a little over 30,000 acres. So this gets a little complicated, and it does relate to the reforestation strategies after fire. So you look at the 2008 year, and you see that almost 70,000 acres of high severity fire, and then you watch the reforestation response, the planting response. Richard just had mentioned and reminded us that there's a delay between the event and the beginning of a response to it in terms of reforestation. So yeah, the first year, 2009, is when the seedlings are growing in a nursery, and 2010 is when they start to get planted. And nobody's been able to plant all of these large fires in 1 year. So it takes a little time. So that's just a segment of what gets planted after those many fires. So that was a very big year. And of course, if you look, you can see that we're starting to accumulate very big years. But what I want to show you in this next one is this is what 2008 looked like. Every one of those lines there. This is a screen capture for one of the web pages that we use. It's an outward-facing, a public website where people can look and see the effects of wildland fire by year for each of our national forests. So you can see on the left hand, and the 2008 fires have been selected. You see that long list of fires that were, all of them burned at least 1,000 acres of forest land. That's the threshold in order to get into this list. And then over on the right-hand side, you can see in the far left column, not here, but on your own website, when you look at the website, you'd be able to see the number of acres of forest land that were involved in those fires. So that's why this one is in 2008 looks so huge. Awful lot of fires. Very challenging year for wildfire. So let's start talking about how to make this stuff work. So we're confronted with a large number of acres. The number of dollars that would be required to get the work done is really pretty substantial. And even if we're just talking about the work, the actual seedlings, the cost of the seedlings, and the planting of the seedlings, and the sequence of activities after that to make sure that they thrive. So here's what here's what a couple of fund types look for us. Many of you probably have heard about KV funding, so that's illustrated in blue. And then the red bars, they represent the Reforestation Trust Fund. Two entirely different sources of funding. You can see that the Reforestation Trust Fund is a relatively constant amount. It's fortunately, it's a constant we can almost count on every year to be about the same amount of money. But you can see the huge amount of variation in KV funds. And that's related to the way that our timber sales have been changing over time. agency, you can see that funds used in 2006, 2007, those are funds that are being used for work that occurred much earlier. So the impact of wildland fire and KV collections doesn't really start to show up and be represented until you take a look at some of those more current years. And you can see also that the number of dollars that are associated with those blue bars are declining. And that's a function of one primary thing, and that's most of the modern timber sales with the agency include very little regeneration harvesting. Within the forest, the Lassen, the Plumas, and the Sierraville on the Tahoe National Forest that were involved in the Quincy Library Group Act, they had small group selections, so they were able to collect money through KV collections and continue to reestablish forests with those funds. But it's a relatively small amount of acres compared to the region's need associated with wildfire. So this is the stuff we can count on, the Reforestation Trust Fund, and then a small amount of KV funds. Part of this is I should mention there's one other consideration or one other contribution that's made. We have a handful of partners that offer at least a little bit of funding, especially for the cost, getting at least the cost of the seedlings covered. The National Forest Foundation helps, Arbor Day Foundation helps, and as well as American Forest, they also help. Every year they fund seedling costs for a variety of our projects. It helps, but it's a very small. If I tried to show this on a chart like this, you'd hardly see it. But boy, we sure appreciate the money that they do provide for us. There's another thing that Richard mentioned, something about carbon, and I should mention now that we do have a couple of carbon-related projects, and because these are big ticket items, there is a fair amount of money that's associated with them, but they're limited acreages and they're not really affected by the main topic that I'm covering today, with how to deal with fire salvage and reforestation. Okay, so these are the main ones. The Reforestation Trust Fund that we have been able to count on for many years. This is something like 24, 25 years it's been in place, and then a declining amount in KV funds. So this is really the heart of what I wanted to talk about. So I think everybody on the call understands that salvage sales are controversial on national forest lands. A lot of people have different opinions about whether they are valuable or not. And because we live in this public affected world here, we need to address what people are commenting about and are concerned about. So I want to talk about two major areas here. Now, if you were a private forest landowner, most of the trees that were affected, that were killed or damaged severely by the wildfire, they're probably already off the land. That's a benefit that National Forest System managers don't often have at all. So I want to talk about these two items: it's project design and timing. So we're faced with thousands of acres that are burned severely, high severity fire. Most of the trees are dead. And then it's our challenge to try to make sense of a collection of objectives, including wildlife habitat objectives. It's just very difficult for all the people to get in sync with what they want to have happen on National Forest System land. And even something like wildlife habitat, and we've been in the game for wildlife habitat for a long time, we still end up trying to design things as if they're new topics almost every single time. And the project design, especially related to trees that are reserved to meet other objectives, really affects the ability of having a financially attractive timber sale. Every one of those trees that's reserved, and they tend to be the larger trees, they all affect the ability to come up with something that looks like an attractive timber sale to somebody who might bid on it. The other thing that happens, of course, is timing. Most of you are aware of or have been involved in the sometimes tedious and long-term process of analyzing a variety of impacts, potential impacts from salvage harvesting. It takes a long time. Some surveys need to take more time than others. For example, to evaluate the presence or absence of a plant species, a sensitive plant species, you have to wait till the next year to even see whether the plant is even there. Certain wildlife habitat survey protocols require that they're looked at more than one season. So these things add up to what really are delays from the date of the fire to the date when the trees might be available for removal. These are important. These are very important things, though, because in order to provide an attractive package for a salvage sale, you have to make sense of this so that you provide an operator with something that'll actually work, and they'll be able to operate quickly and move those dead trees out of the woods with value. The other thing that you know about, I'm sure, is that as the weeks and months go by in the summer, little trees, the smaller trees, start to lose their merchantability value, and so they keep getting eliminated from the total volume that's available in the sale. The 12, 14, 16-inch diameter trees, if we wait too long, if the process takes too long, then they're not even available to us. Consider that with the other comment I made earlier about most of the largest trees are often looked at as have primary value as wildlife habitat instead of saw timber value. So it's tugging at both ends when these projects are being designed. The salvage sale program. We have something called the salvage sale fund that allows us to use money like a checking account in a sense. Then we can use that money to pay for the analysis and the administration, the preparation and administration of salvage timber sales. It costs a lot of money to do the analysis, sometimes millions of dollars. But we have to pay the checkbook back. We have to put the money back. We struggle to put the money back with any of these sales that I just talked about. Another linkage to why it's important to have an attractive sale, a financially attractive sale, because collections have to be made to start to refill the salvage sale fund after we've used hundreds of thousands of dollars for analysis. It's normal now. It's been going on for years in the agency, despite a lot of efforts that people have taken to look at how to increase efficiencies. What can we live with? What information can we live without? What do we really need? It hasn't really resulted in tremendous cost savings. So the salvage sale fund needs to be refilled, and every one of our salvage sales is making an effort to try to refill that program. Often at the disadvantage of the Knudsen Vandenberg, the KV funding. Most of you are familiar with, years ago, sounds like a historical document here, doesn't it? Years ago when we had timber management plans that called for certain levels of harvest, certain levels of regeneration harvesting, collections would be made and we'd be able to fund reforestation after that. Salvage sales are different. The priority is often placed on restoring the salvage sale fund dollars. I looked through all of our records, all of our current SAI, the KV plan records, as well as the timber sale records, to look and see what percentage are we trying to provide to KV to help reforest the deforested acreages, and it's a very small percentage. But I can tell you that we're trying to refill the salvage sale fund with hundreds of thousands of dollars whenever we can, and it's just the way that it works. If we lose the salvage sale fund, then even preparing the timber sales, preparing the salvage sales would be impossible to pull off to the extent that we're doing now. These hundreds of thousands of dollars that are used in association with the, with this type of a fire program or fire effects program, it's just not going to happen unless we have something like the salvage sale fund. Appropriated funds to date have never been provided to match the need after these large stand replacement fires. Okay, so I wanted to make sure that these 2 points are really key, because this is what we live with. We've got a relatively large amount of wildfire acreages that seem to accumulate every year. We want to reestablish forests in these places, and we're confronted with these financial challenges. The salvage sale program needs to be sound, needs to be financially valid year after year. We need to make sure that the funds are there to even consider the salvage sale. But the amount that's spent for the analysis effort, and really in comparison, the analysis effort is is the big ticket item here, not so much the sale preparation and administration. Although those costs are not trivial either. It's a difficult place that we're put in. And so what can you do? So we've got a relatively small amount of money from KV from these sales, and in some cases none. We have the Reforestation Trust Fund, and we have small amounts from other donors. The only thing beyond that we've been able to benefit from is sometimes through the political process, somebody decides that it's a good idea to help supplement some of the work with additional funds. But we can never know how to predict that. It's not something that we can lobby for. Fortunately, people have interest in the reforestation of big wildfires, and so they kind of work on their own. And sometimes it helps, and sometimes it doesn't. And many ideas have been thrown around this year in response to the rim fire, but so far I haven't heard anything that would help us out in that regard. The acreages, most of the acreage that I presented to you on this first slide here in 2013, you know, a lot of that's related to the rim fire, and it's just amazing. And the American fire on the Tahoe, and now I've forgotten I think it's the Aspen fire on the Sierra. All three of them add up to be a lot of acreages, and we're still faced with the same type of challenges that I'm trying to paint for you here. It's just takes a lot of money, and we don't really we can't get it all done in 1 year. So the only way that we've been able to make this work is use the dependable funding that we get, little bit by little bit every year, with primarily with the Reforestation Trust funds and any special programs that people have been able to, our elected officials have been able to provide for us. So I think that provides the messages I wanted to provide for you today. And if there's any questions.
We have one question. Susie, you want to move it into the center of the screen? Nancy Budge, who works with the Cuyamaca Rancho State Park, is asking whether any KV or RFTF or other funds through Forest Service are available for reforestation on state lands.
The KV funds will both of those funds are meant for National Forest System lands only.
Okay. There used to be, of course, there used to be the Forest Stewardship Program, which did provide funding for that's what they used to call the SIP funds, which were analogous to CAL FIRE's CFIP funds. There's also the Forest Improvement Program. I don't know if that's still in effect, where cost-share programs that were available to private lands, possibly to state lands. I'm not sure about that. Maybe Steve or Chris can address whether the SIP or SIP funds. I don't even think they still exist. Do you know, Joe?
I can sneak in real quick and tell Nancy that if it's possible that some of the Forest Service state and private funds might be available. So if she contacts me by email, I can at least get that answered by somebody that will know.
Great. Yeah, Lorna Bilbavalmi, I think she's the only Lorna that we have joining us, is saying that state funds can qualify for CFIP funding. And maybe when Chris gives his talk, he can talk about that a little bit as to whether or not any of those CFIP funds have been going to state lands. And I don't know if that's the case or not. Any other questions for Joe? Brent, the next two presentations are going to address funding for private land reforestation after fire. So you'll get that in a minute here. Susie, you want to get Andy's question there? Andy's asking, how can we advocate? In other words, how can we support increased funding for reforestation on Forest Service lands? Right into your congressman, I guess, huh? How would you do that, Joe?
Yeah, well, yes, that's how it would be done. As agency employees, we don't do that. We kind of wait for people to ask us what we need, and sometimes our elected officials do ask what would be needed. But yes, as private citizens, that would be the way to do that. Sometimes, and actually, the National Forest Foundation was created to kind of be an advocate for the national forest system, and so they also might be worth. They might also be of assistance to us indirectly. They do help a little bit with seedlings, but it does, like I said earlier, it's not a tremendous amount of money.
No.
It'd be great if they
Susie,
provided millions.
Susie, maybe you can find us the website for the National Forest Foundation, and we can post it at the end of the presentation so that if people want to get in contact with them, they can.